Jason. Just
No
wanted to jump
worries, no worries. Always important.
in. Okay,
Um,
recording is on.
So I timed this to 5 minutes before, a little under. I'm Jason Van Est. I think I'm representing New York Tech in this conversation. If you go to my website, I kind of wear three hats. I'm a general practice architect, and for the last 15 years, I've been a technology consultant, and I've grown to be a tenured professor at New York Tech. I'll just sort of take those two pieces and tell you a bit more about them so you know who's up on the screen. I started doing building information modeling consulting in 2008 after I got my license, and I worked for a couple of years at Hugh Hardy's last firm, which is Hardy Collaboration Architecture. We had that's my toddler. We had the joy of running the first GSA pilot project for a federal courthouse in Jackson, Mississippi through Revit. And that was such a big, nasty problem that lots of other folks wanted to hear about it. I've consulted over the last 15 years with 15 architecture firms through AP3D, another 17 on my own, and 3 through Gridley Architects. And if there is a pattern with my consulting, you know, architects have called me in to change their workflows in the design side. But over the last 3-4 years, a lot of the repeat customers are architecture firms that are asking me now to help the general contractors or their owner's rep get on board with building information modeling. And so because the repeat customers have really, really good ideas, I end up doing a lot more VDC consulting, currently with Gridley Consulting. And you know, we write the specs for doing VDC through construction. We train subs. We sort of get the BIM execution plan for the design team. We end up getting the VDC execution plan for everybody else. And that quite elegantly mirrors my time as a tenured professor at New York Tech. They took me on in 2009 to flip it all the appropriate places in the curriculum to BIM-based or BIM-informed teaching. And the places we've had the most success is, of course, our construction documents course. Since being hired, I've coordinated that course every year and taught it every semester. I'm up to my 24th time teaching it, and it's a well-oiled machine, I think. Although Andre taught as an adjunct this spring, he might have some jabs to throw in. Our sort of capstone studio for the 4-year program at New York Tech is Project Integration Studio, and their BIM collaboration workflows are required and have been for years. We've also played with introducing it in our 5-year capstone, which is Comprehensive Design Studio. I've actually taught real estate finance with BIM workflows, with students bringing their 327 models, their construction documents models, and the real estate finance for cost estimating. If you do a search right now, I have an article interview with Sigma about that workflow. We brought it into building and construction, and of course, students asked for electives. So on the kind of consulting side for the last 15 years, I feel like we're fleshing out the sort of IPD workflows backwards and re-engineering them, and we're slowly getting to that holy grail. And I don't think we have a good way of describing the adoption of BIM at New York Tech in such clean terms. For this particular discussion, you know, there's a lot of really great topics I think we're going to go over, and I went ahead and just did a New Yorker style grid for a couple that I think I can contribute a lot to. Discussing how syllabuses are getting updated and scheduling. I see in my own thinking, moving students away from sole inventioning and towards more versioning will be useful, towards collaboration and away from their own individual pathfinding in pretty much all of my syllabi. The kind of studio projects that lend themselves to BIM, if you asked me that a year ago, of course, I would have had a much different conversation about that. But I offer this kind of direction in my own thinking. Strengths in BIM and upper studios, you know, where to really take advantage of the tool in upper studios as students get more technically adopted. A lot of our conversations at New York Tech have spanned the culinary distinction between concoctions and decoctions. I don't know if you guys are are into any culinary theory, concoctions being anything you sort of add together, and decoctions being things that you simmer for a while and they really get beautiful. And in the upper level studios, we're always aiming for that second one, and BIM helps us do that better. I have descriptions about how we can right size programs and thoughts about it, and even sort of a way to discuss the learning styles that we find in our studios. You know, folks who do really well in an open world and others that kind of need a structured situation, and how BIM informs that. And then this is a quick look at how sort of visual communication structures and construction courses end up in the design sequence at New York Tech. And I may refer to this when we talk about how we try and synthesize architectural ideas in the studio and how BIM informs that. These are the slides I might refer to later as we engender a discussion. And with that, I shall stop sharing. I tried to do. I was over. I'm sorry, Andre.
No worries. Quick note on the side, everybody on the attendee side. There's a chat function. If you come up with any questions, you know, type them into the chat function, and we'll come up later in the Q&A about this. Let's go on my screen, mathematically positive. So next one is Roger. Got to put down that Corona.
Yeah,
what's your take on the current situation?
I thought you might notice that one, but it is really good. I don't know if you guys like, you know, it's after hours. I should be able to participate. My current take. Let me just do a little introduction. I mean, as Andre mentioned, everybody most people in the group know me. I've been following or participating in the group, presenting to the group for a bunch of years. I'm a BIM specialist at Microsoft Resources, normally in the New York office, currently working for the past 166 days in the Long Island home office. I studied environmental architecture at Arizona State University, still studying. But I provide, you know, BIM implementation support and training to, you know, our clients, architectural, engineering, construction clients. Working with Emilio since 2001, so hit a milestone pretty in the recent. I love solving problems with our architectural clients. So, you know, modeling issues, those implementing Revit on a large projects, you know, dispersed teams, and now more oftenly helping everybody work remotely. But I've been teaching Revit, and you know, ever since 2002 when Autodesk acquired it, and you know, everything changes. So you know, Microsoft Resources is doing their best to offer you know, reduced cost training, making it all online, obviously. But you know, we've been working online for many years, so we're comfortable doing that. You know, working from home, providing you know, these remote meetings just like this. So it's been working out pretty well. I'm going to chime in anytime there's a discussion about the technology and how we could best use the technology. So you know, we found that yeah, classes can actually still happen. You know, university style is not typically the way I teach class, right? Our classes are usually 3 days a week, like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then we're done. So doing it remotely and trying to digest, you know, 24 hours of class into, you know, 2 hours at a time, or at the most 4 hours at a time, it takes quite a bit, you know, to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So we've learned that, you know, having meetings like this and actually being able to see each other's face and talk to each other is crucial. I mean, without an application like this, I wouldn't be able to see how my students are reacting and how they're handling the load or participating in an exercise. So, you know, I'm looking forward to talking about how we use these things, like BIM360 Design, for instance. You know, being able to collaborate and work together, you know, from anywhere. As long as their internet connection is good, they're going to be able to contribute to the project. As long as their hardware can handle the installation, they're going to be able to contribute to the project. But one interesting aspect that we've been learning is, you know, getting everybody in the right space to learn the application. So if you're working from home, who knows what kind of hardware you're using. So we've been playing around and offering things like an Amazon Workspace where we can the students can remote in and gain access to, you know, a clean, reliable workspace with the application, the licensing, and in most cases, the Amazon Workspace has been just a fantastic, you know, connection to the internet, and that's all we need. So I look forward to participating in this, you know, in this panel. Thank you, Andre, for inviting me, and I look forward to, you know, learning something else from these smart individuals that I'm here with. So, thank you.
All right, thank you for that. Let's keep going here. Onur, why don't you give us your take on this information modeling, even if it's not buildings anymore, and how to teach in this environment?
Yeah, let me, I'm going to share my screen in a second, but yeah, I'm trained as an architect by background and immediately became a computational designer, maybe even before I became an architect, and then contributed to architecture, designing a lot of skyscrapers and large scale buildings for KPF. And then, you know, going back to school, back and forth at MIT, got a little deeper into the theory of computation too in design. And currently I'm working for New Balance, applying some understandings for data to design and some minuscule structures for making performance products. The reason for me to be here today is probably because I taught last semester at MIT, and the name of the class was Superseding Parts and Computing Wholes. So maybe a challenge of how can you approach, you know, computation with the understanding of the part-whole relationships, right? So we put parts together, but the parts necessarily don't make the whole, or, you know, the usual idea that the whole is larger than its parts and so on. So I designed these 4 tracks to teach this class, calling them presence, function, quality, and whole. And first one being presence is more about visual computing and trying to understand the visual qualities of things in terms of computation. So there's some theories that we can think about in this respect. For instance, shape grammars, you know, you can either generate drawings or paintings or describe them using visual rules. The function part was mostly about the performance of the thing. Function is either the intent of something to, you know, work in a proper way, or if something is functioning, it means that it's fulfilling a purpose, right? So while looking into this, we discussed like what function could be, and, you know, what sort of, not about designing an object for a function, but we thought about designing a function and then the object kind of like follows that. Of course, that goes without saying, you know, you have some issues of like performance, and how can you, you know, define the function and quantify, you know, let's say the functional properties. And I'm reflecting some sort of, let's say, pressure data for that function. I think one crucial point while teaching this was early on, I planned to empower the students with multiple tools, or if one tool, multiple methods of doing things. So this is kind of like gave the students to not follow one single track, but you know, just use the tool that they feel comfortable with. And then the next step was quality, as I mentioned. So this is mostly, this part we were supposed to do by hand, you know, printing parts, looking into parts, working on design for additive manufacturing. But unfortunately, everybody had to go home, right? So I need to adapt. So for the quality part, we tried to use some simulations and metrics to decide, you know, and pick designs. And the whole is pretty much putting all this idea of presence, function, and quality together and make a design system, which, you know, helps you generate, let's say, various options, and with the theoretical background that you can discuss if this thing is working and so on. And again, like, you know, I ended up here in this panel, I guess, because I ended up recording our final review and posted it on YouTube, and, you know, heard from a lot of people. So these videos are pretty much showing all the, you know, the process that the students went through. But more than that, probably because I ended up writing this article, because I had to adapt as I was teaching, right? So it's a mouthful of like very long title, remote teaching, why a front-loaded and fast-paced class fared well in the wake of the pandemic. But it somehow, I shared my experience of adaptation, I think bidirectional adaptation by students and myself. So I'm here to maybe discuss about that a little bit. And for the BIM side, I am familiar with BIM, but I have a challenging question, I think, for myself too, that I asked to myself about BIM for years. So is a tool that, preserves the information. So you design the information and you preserve it. Let's say a window is a window, a door is a door, and a roof is a roof all the time. So this helps us to, let's say, be consistent and, helps us with the construction, let's say. But design is something very interesting that, you deal with ambiguity. So we play with ducks and rabbits, maybe, depending on the orientation. But design is a place in which you discover a new image, like which is this crocodile, unexpected thing emerging. So, and combined with remote teaching, today I have one main line, which is if this is going to be any challenge, like if we kind of like put a heavy foot on BIM while teaching remotely, how do we kind of bring back this to teaching? So yeah, this is going to be pretty much my contribution. And I'm really again, I would be least qualified in BIM, but super happy that I'll be hearing from, again, other panelists.
Excellent. Leonard,
Right.
you're up next.
All right, thanks, guys. Unfortunately, I don't have a presentation. I was stuck chopping up wood on my driveway from 2 trees that fell down on them. So that was my 3 hours before this. So I'll try to explain a little bit. I mean, some people know me here. I've been with the Revit user group since the very beginning. I worked 10 years or so as an architect. Then I joined Lira Group as a director for the VDCO department as we started. And really focused on the construction part a lot and facilities management and linking design construction operations together. In, 2008, I started teaching at Pratt, and this has been 12 years now. And integrated classes started at the CM side, but then started working also with the architects and the FM graduate students, and done a lot of different type of classes, but focus a lot of, it's technology and BIM, but a lot about collaboration and how do we work better together? Does these tools work to actually enable that, or does it actually separates us? And I think the conclusion is it's how you use these tools, and it really comes down to people. And I think, my observation of this industry, and I did start up my own company last November, FormD. Last 2 weeks ago, we presented about that. Really looking at how we can look at life cycle in a better way. How can we digitize buildings, not only design, but every single building there is. And I don't see a barrier between academia and commercial that much. I like to link them. They have different roles, but I think both works best if you can sort of collaborate in that aspect as well. So we are running this spring we ran, and we're going to do this fall too, sort of from the COVID lens, remote working together with the Department of Design and Construction, a couple of architecture firms, about modular housing in New York City, emergency help potentially. How can we build buildings quickly for emergent needs? And then create this sort of dialogue, and then let the technology be the vehicle to deliver this. So we used softwares, obviously at Revit. We used the Revisto for the collaboration aspect a lot, because it really fits in on the construction side as well. We use some tools for facilities management there as well, and we have moved all the software online now into an Amazon cloud. So Revit and everything can be logged in by the students, no matter where they are, because they're going to be distributed now. Some might be in China, some in India, and some here in New York City. Can we make this work? So we had a lot of learning we did this spring, because sort of halfway through the semester, we had to shift gears. And it worked out okay, but I think there's a lot of technical issues that we had to work through students couldn't log in where they were, especially like in China, where they have a firewall. Google Documents don't work there, and things like that. So we've sort of created a global schema now of how we're going to work together this fall, because academia, it's been my perspective. It's twice the amount of work as a teacher when you're online versus when you see a face-to-face. And I think that's really makes it clear how important personal meetings are. And I think technology is not a replacement, it's an augmentation. And it's that combination. How do we use the technology where it's supposed to be and still get the benefits of the personal meetings, you know? So I would love to hear from the other panelists and, you know, that kind of thinking. And then after COVID is over, where are we? You know, I believe a lot of these tools we are now forced to kind of implement are going to stick. So what's the future of education and so forth? So anyway, that's my quick overrun. So
beautiful. And yeah, I mean, Leonard's last two questions are kind of exactly the two questions why I had this idea of putting together a panel like this. For exactly that reason. It was my first time earlier this year teaching in an academic setting, and all of a sudden we were going online and I had all this work, and I was like, well, what on earth is going on here?
Yeah.
And is this good? Is this bad? Where is this going? And then, you know, after that initial shock, which ones of these things are we going to keep? Which bits and pieces are going to, or are we, and this is a snapshot in time, right? We can't predict, but which pieces do you think are going to stand the test of time and will actually improve if we keep them online? And which bits are you saying, hey, look, as soon as I can get rid of this, I'll get rid of it and move back to what I was doing before? So that new hybrid that we'll be facing, you know, not only this fall, but, you know, the fall of 2025.
mm-hmm.
You know, Jason, why don't you go?
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, gotta pick on someone.
There was a wall of questions there, and I think to get a foothold on that, I think I can tell everybody about your experience teaching construction documents at New York Tech in the middle of a pandemic. 327 construction documents was a well-oiled machine. I handed Andre all his lectures, all his assignments, all his exams, and invited him to change anything he wanted. And a lot of the ingenuity in there was us over 12 years backwards discovering what Owner wrote eloquently in a 2,000 word Medium account. That class for now hundreds of students has been something where we teach 2/3 of the course content before midterm, fail everybody, dangle all sorts of extra credit. So they add, structural sets and mechanical sets and electrical sets, and really watch the students, the undergraduate students' integrity when they're looking at grades they've never seen before. And they start realizing construction documents and red lines and whatnot are a serious thing. And really the fuel of the second half of that semester is integrity. And it's not the student, or it's not the teachers. It's the students and how they respond to adversity and pressure and making projects the best they can in a teamwork setting. There's a lot of time spent, blaming team members for performance, but in the end, the unlimited extra credit in that class really keeps people going. What works? A professor looking at them every day and saying, I lectured about this. Why didn't you do? I lectured about this. Why didn't you do this? And I don't know about Andre's experience, but that ability to just look a student in the eye and say, I told you this. Why didn't you remember it when you made your CD set? Is very, very it hits the ego, and it gets them in ways that I think when you stare them down over a web screen just doesn't hit. So some of the things I'm looking forward to sticking are, our adoption of BIM 360 like tools, where students previously were only able to collaborate in an NYIT computer lab. And I love the fact that BIM 360 means you can log in pretty much anywhere and start collaborating. That sweeps aside all sorts of, well, I had to work and and then the train was late and all that crap. But one of the things I'm just sore to do is look my students in the eye again, and that sort of knife, I'll conclude with, kind of cuts both ways, because I focused in this initial set of comments about how it leverages their integrity. But when you look a student in the eyes, you also give them permission to be passionate about what you go off on tangents. When you go and say, oh, this is a little off on a tangent, but let me spend 30 seconds talking about this wacky story I remember. That's giving them permission to fall in love with something that you fell in love with. And I think that's kind of the fuel of the egos and passion of architecture, not the business of architecture. And that has completely evaporated with these online experiences with my students. I can go off on a tangent, but when I can't compete with Facebook, Instagram, I think probably half of us have 3 screens looking at us right now, even if we only have 1 screen. That's not a learning environment. So I hope that opens a foothold for our colleagues here.
I mean, I think that's definitely a thing. Like when you're in the classroom, you can read between the lines. Also, does the student understand what I'm talking about? Which I don't feel like I get through camera and a bunch of Zoom squares. And also the thing of gather around a table is a different sort of social chemistry there. And I think that the whole thing with passion is so important. I think such an important role is to motivate the students to feel like this is important and I want to do this. And it's much harder to do that online, I feel. So sort of like you buy music and listen to it online versus a live performance. It's complete 2 different things. That interaction with a band, you have to see the band for that.
All right, we're going backwards. Onur, you're next.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I agree with that, and it's a long subject. But I think that something that I discovered on the road is when you're in a classroom, if you create the sensation that like we are in this together, instead of me teaching you, I think it makes life a little easier. And online teaching somehow amplified that for me. And of course, I'm telling this, that this would make a big difference depending on the level of the students, right? So if you're teaching like junior people or the first year studio, well, that would be super challenging. But for teaching graduate class, I think the point was more like, okay, I mean, there are assignments, there are things, but it was more like, okay, what do you want to do for yourself? Because I'm at my home, I need to be with you for 3 hours, give as much as I can. And if you want to take as much as you can and do something and come back, that would be great. So that was helpful for me. And for some reason, it became more realized online. And one reason was maybe this, like this one-to-one conversation, because, like now I'm speaking and I mean, most of the people are listening. Not everybody has to. I agree with that, the other windows. But when other people speak, I see their face. And the class was really like that, right? And the other thing that I did was maybe carrying this outside the class hours, right? So if you have any residency any other time, and this would also depend on the available hours that you have on the side, but it really gave me an opportunity to speak, person to person, like one-on-one at other times, which is more work for the teacher, I guess. But at the same time, it helps the students to understand that it's really theirs, right, to do. Going back to the construction documentation, why are you doing that? Those, red curves and errors and so on. This is not for me. It's for you, kind of thing. Yeah, and what will remain and what will go, I think one other thing that happened is, you know, I think like many schools, they have some, you know, they use online tools, both for, let's say, co-working spaces, right? You have like Bluescape, Mural, and so on and so forth, you know, the virtual boards. But at the same time, you have to get organized. I don't know how you used to do this, but, you know, I have, let's say, one folder for every week. And if I'm teaching a, you know, whatever lecture, it's in there. If there's an assignment, it's in there. And if there's a tutorial example files, it's in there. So it's like week by week or subject by subject, right? So this thing became even more tangible with this situation because you have to have it there. You don't have a chance to put it on the memory stick and in the last moment and pull it from your pocket and distribute in the class, right? So that changed. And I think that's that became super real, and that's going to remain. That's one of the things that I'm thinking. So more like being organized digitally in a very serious way. And the last thing I would add maybe is, so I'm having this experience in practice too, right? So I'm a part of this innovation team at New Balance, and we are trying to come up with new ideas, make new products, and organize all this information together, right? So information modeling and keeping everything in place is super challenging, pretty interesting. But at the same time, that is also bringing the notion in my mind that, okay, everybody knows their responsibility and you have to get things done. So maybe an extension or add on to your question is how could we make this environment like fruitful enough or keep it short enough that, you know, people don't go, or the students don't go to fourth and fifth screen or, you know, the window and just be lost there, just kind of like instead be looking into this thing really quick and, you know, get what they are supposed to get done. So that's pretty much that.
It's very interesting. I mean, I like what you guys are saying, and I'm seeing that as I teach, you know, my classes. Obviously, remote training is twice as much effort, if not more than that. I mean, you said twice as much effort, but the students make or break it, right? So we're doing our best to provide all the information up front. And as you said, Onar, I mean, I have to put a lot more effort. I have to make all of the resources available. I have to give access to those folders. I have to make sure that I have backups and they can't edit them or remove them. You know, I'm making all this information available, but it comes down to the student. I had one student who took a class. The class was scheduled and they were on vacation, and they decided, hey, hell or high water, they're taking and attending this class. So now they have more opportunity to take the class from wherever they are. This one particular student was in Lake George, right? And the hotel room that he was in did not have the proper internet access. So he got in his car, drove up to the business center, which was closed, and got close enough to get Wi-Fi from the business center so he could attend the class in the car. Right? I mean, you know, that's really a student that's, you know, that really wants to learn. I mean, I see that there are three types of students, right, in my experience. There's the real student who wants to learn. There's the prisoner, and then there's a vacationer. So, you know, when they're paying for it, you would think that everybody would be the student and they would want to learn this thing because the boss is paying for it. And, you know, they're paying for it in you know, in your classes as well, but you have to have the involvement. They have to be in it all 110%. So what we're doing is, you know, our normal 3-day course would have been, that's it. You come to day 1, we take a break, you leave. You come to day 2, we take a break, you leave. Now they can review the course because I'm making the cloud recording available. So they can go and they could basically rewatch the whole entire class if they were so inclined. And again, work on the class. I'm seeing them uploading models in the middle of the night, you know? So, you know, it's nice to have students that are well engaged and contributing to the course. Without video like this, like we're seeing right now, the class is not as much fun. So, you know, I require students, like when we're setting up this class, we require them to have 2 monitors. How are you going to do it if you're not? How are you going to have Revit on one screen and the Ring Central on the other screen, you know, or what we use like Zoom? So, you know, you have to have at least that. You have to have a webcam because I want to see you interacting. I want to see you nodding your head that you have the, you know, you understand the exercise. When it's quiet and there's no reaction, or you don't even see their faces, it's a really tough class to teach. I'm glad Jason mentioned BIM360 Design, because without it, we wouldn't really have a class. I mean, here we are, all the content is there, all the students are contributing. It just makes me have to review, in this last class, 18 exercises almost on a daily basis. So yeah, it's definitely requiring a lot more work. And I can't see, firms not using BIM360 Design to contribute to the project. They should be able to, when the office returns, okay, sure, we're in the office, but I still have to take care of one of my mantras in class, and when I'm teaching Revit, focus on the family, right? And of course, we all know the joke, the family is the door or the window, but you still have to focus on your spouse and your kids. And one of the benefits of this pandemic, I think, I spent a lot more time with my kids. They were home from school. I'm working from home. I'm able to make a good meal. We're able to sit down together. If I need to go back to work, it's a few steps away. So I'm putting more hours in at work, but it's still allowing me to spend time with my family. So these things are going to stick.
Good, excellent. Talking about, talking about types of students. Jason, when we had a pre-meeting, you also had a dichotomy of students and student types that I thought was lovely. And in your intro, you kind of brushed over it kind of quickly. Do you want to elaborate on that? I think it is a very important distinction, just like Rogers, what was it, vacationer, prisoner, and what was the other one? The guy who really wants to learn, right?
Somebody wants to learn.
Yeah, and the student. I think that kind of fits in with your experience, right? And your analysis, Jason.
Yeah, I'll pull up that screen for one more second there. I think I did well trying to capture what we talked about. My experience with students does not conflict with Rutgers in any way. But there is a sort of another dimension, another axis that I'm noticing, which are they're the kind of students that just want an open world, and they kind of want a spirit guide to help them kind of smoke the peyote and warn them where all the gods are. But they're out there. They're pushing all the buttons before you tell them about it. They're turning over rocks. And in a studio setting, it's really invigorating, because these are the students that'll come and they'll have 4 models waiting on their desk the next time you talk to them. And each one is so radically different. And the dichotomy that I think we're talking about is another kind of student in a studio setting that requires a lot of structure in order to sort of put their ankle in the shallow end, get used to the water temperature. They really appreciate, in this analogy, learning what all the buttons do and seeing a professor do it right before they sit there and really interrogate that goddamn button. It's a twist button in Rhino, so I use it on a sphere, and then I use it on a cone, and then I use it on a cube, and then I use it on these 500 cubes over here, and then I use it this way. And you go to their desk the next week in studio, and they might have 4 models as well, but they're all very studied tweaks of the last one. And so in that scenario, I would just say that COVID hasn't slowed down those open world students. They're still there to get the most out of their education, and they just needed the free time to go dive. It has really kind of artificially hindered the kind of student needs that first heavily structured scaffolding with which to create the vocabularies, either the shape grammars or the verbal, like the actual lingual vocabulary they need to sort of cut through what sounds like jargon at first and get to the way that they're thinking. What I would point out is that building information modeling as a tool, really helps both of those learning styles. Because you can sort of have a conversation with yourself. Oh, let's cut a section through this thing. Oh, let's look at a plan on the next level. The internal dialogue for both learning styles is enriched. What I'd notice with our syllabi at New York Tech is that the syllabi need to kind of push the students to kind of get the juice from each other a bit more, encourage more teamwork and more collaboration. That really is helping the open world students a lot more than it's helping the kind of structured learners. Because if we're putting you in a team and you're paired up with someone who isn't the same kind of learning type or learning style you are, there's this negotiation style that the individual who's going out in the open world is just, okay, well, you wait here, I'll go make the first 10 models. And you know, when you get a couple of teams made where you have a bunch of structured learners with each other, you get that rare kind of synergy that I would describe where they both work off each other's strengths and collaborate around each other's weaknesses in a way that is sensitive, empathetic, and ultimately creates the kind of lasting professional relationships that you see 20 years later. You know, we met in school and. Does that start the conversation in ways that you were looking for, Andre?
That's the monologue I was looking for, yes. Uno, Leonard, anything you want to take on to that? Leonard, you're muted.
Anyway, I got an important email, so I had to read. So my apologies. I completely missed Jason. My apologies.
That's all right.
No worries.
See the drawbacks with online, right?
That's the drawback. You can't even pay you the same attention you're expecting from your students, right?
Yeah.
Maybe,
Uno,
maybe I really like the conversation about the student types because like one discussion we are having about everything, both teaching and practice and, you know, working from home, the things that are going to stick or change. In a way, like I have this feeling some of the stuff they've already fundamentally changed. So there's not going to be any turning back for those kind of things. Like I feel this thing. I mean, and it just looks that way, right? So beyond my feelings. So I have my reasons too. But at the same time, there are things that are not really changing at all. And I really like Roger when, you know, put these like 3 types of students. I don't know, it might be 4 or 5, maybe we can find more, but that agency is very important, right? So, and the question then is, I think that's what I was trying to say because I'm holding that part. So beyond teaching the subject, whatever the subject matter is, this new world is about teaching that sort of agency. I think that's what I was trying to say in terms of, you know, if like everybody needs to do what they are supposed to do, and this is not for instructors, like I'm burning with desire to teach, but it's not for me, it's for you to, you know, move forward in your life, and this is the subject matter kind of thing. So you know, and this is again maybe, you know, it's a primary thing in teaching too, right? So I'm not saying anything new, but the question is, how could that agency be generated during this sort of like remote teaching, right? So you're not in the classroom, so you don't have the opportunity to physically be present and, you know, whatever you're trying to give. So it's going to be pretty much challenging. And I can just throw something again on the table in terms of, hey, okay, so we say save time from commuting, right? We said we are spending more time because we have this one-to-one. Well, that kind of maybe balance that off. So one point, again, maybe I'm repeating myself, but I just want to kind of push this discussion a little more. Just proposing these multiple options or tools or versions of solutions to work on, and because now it's digital, I'm assuming it will be easier to make them ready, right? So you don't have to, we can prepare 3 different materials or tutorials. We don't have to show all of them, right? You can just show one and say, hey, there are 2 other ways of doing this thing, and then you can go with that if you like. So that might be one way to, you know, amplify this term of this type of like agency. So the B type of student that Regis was pointing out to becomes the A type, you know, the vacationer becomes the you know, the guy who wants to, whatever, like, you know, pull the train or something. So I don't know if you guys have anything else in your mind in terms of like how to push this forward, maybe get more engagement and amplify this agency of the students.
I mean, there is definitely a difference between undergraduate and graduate students, I find, as a general, where graduates, you don't need to hold their hands as much and they're much more self-motivated. While undergraduate, it's depending also what year there are. I think it is harder the younger they are. The more hand-holding that is needed, the more guidance that you need to do. Because especially like the young students coming in that haven't really found their profession maybe. So you need to sort of talk a little more, get them to understand what the profession is about. And I think that works much better in the classroom. And then also what you teach makes a huge difference. I mean, the BIM class, technology classes are fairly easy, but we do construction document class where we start drawing by hands and even drawing perspectives by hand. Very hard to do that online. Sound like I've created some videos and things like that, but it's one of those things where you're on by a table, you can draw on their drawing on the piece of paper and things like that. And so we're going to have that class this fall, so we'll see how that pans out. But we have high definition cameras filming, because then line quality and stuff like that when you draw by hand and sketch and things like that. How do you teach that online? So we'll see after this semester. So
good. Jason, what are you doing? What are you trying to as means to instill agency, to trigger that agency? What means, if you can't stare them, right? If we can't stare them down in person with that uncomfortable, get on board now. Oh, sorry, there's the camera. Get on board now. If you can't do that in person, what else is there as an attempt? I mean, it doesn't have to be a successful attempt, right? This is about sharing our experience. What have you tried that didn't work? Staring at the camera didn't work. What did work?
I mean, I think so. The spring I was experimenting a lot, and what doesn't work, it's just like record some videos and give them videos and you figure it out. That doesn't work. So the live makes a difference. It's live; they have to show up. So that forces them some sort of engagement. And I think what I ended up doing is one-to-one meetings where I met with each student, which I do in the classroom, which is much faster. But that's talking about time suck, because if I have 10 students or even 20 students, if I spend 10 minutes with each on a meeting and they have certain technical problems and things like that. So, but it did work to get that one-on-one to really see, is this person, what's their state of mind and what's their approach to this and what kind of guidance can I give to this person? Mm-hmm. So I think that's demands more from the teacher, definitely. But it's definitely worth that, because that's I spent a lot of time in the last class to actually talk to each student to see what they liked, what they did not like, and what we do better. And so we're going to continue that one-to-one a lot, and I'm going to team them up into 2 people and have 2 people in the meetings. At least cuts my time in half. But at least we can do more of those on a continuous basis, because if you teach more than one class and you have to constantly have these meetings, you can do that full time almost. You know, so
yeah. Yeah, that's go.
Okay, so I would just say I kind of, my thinking follows exactly what's been said, but I come from a slightly different background. So I think the reason these one-to-one meetings are so important. Let me just mention something completely unrelated to my professional experience. In 2008, I got a McDowell Colony Fellowship. If you guys have ever gone to an artist colony, it's magical, right? Yeah. 24 studios out in the woods. You work all day in your studio. You come in, you have dinner with 24 other artists. writers, poets, composers. It's just months of this too.
Yeah.
Heaven on earth. No other way to describe it. They pay your rent, they feed you, go, 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 go. 2009, I wanted to give back because it changed my life. I joined the Fellows Executive Committee, like the Alumni Committee. And when I was elected president in 2012, I started 2 cycles on the McDowell Colony Board. Now, the reason I want to tell you about this is because the McDowell Colony Board has about 10 artists on it and, 20 amazing captains of industry that have no artistic background or something, but have, such means and such acumen and are at the top of a law firm or at the top of, they got their PhD in Columbia and now they run a hedge fund or something. And what's amazing about these interactions between fellows and board members is they're so afraid of each other. Right? I was the alumni guy there, so I got to many times play a bridge because here's some guy who, spends 50 hours a week looking at a spreadsheet and, can make money like a mint, and he wants to connect with an artist. That's why he joined the board.
Yeah.
Right? And he steps into the artist studio and freezes. A man who in any other situation would have confidence oozing out of his ears and, the car and all that stuff. But it's like, how do I talk to this person? We have a common vocabulary. And so what I would do in these situations to facilitate a conversation, just walk up to a painting and just say, oh, that is so cool. Can you tell me what decision right here? Like, get me in, because I saw it from across the room, and I'm not saying I invented something. It was genuine interest, okay? Because artists are fantastically interested. But it gave both spectators a chance to see that kind of I was showing ignorance and comfortable with it, and I was showing passion, like, oh, that's cool, I want to learn more about that. Tell me, influence me, please. And I could just sort of give both people permission to continue that conversation. I could step away. Now, the reason I tell that story is because I think teaching is very similar to that.
Yeah.
If I have underperforming students, I'll just flip through, let's say they're in a construction documents course. I'll look through the project I've assigned them. And, I'll be talking, oh, that's not, we got to talk about this. And, oh, wait a second. Dude, have you seen this in this project? What do you think of that? Isn't that cool? Where would that show up? Oh, in the reflected, like, get the ball rolling. Get them interested in something that you're interested in. Oh, I really like this. You really did well in this drawing. How can we get that over here? Any of those kind of like sparkle for me, student, get up and tell me how smart you are. It gives them sort of permission to show interest, passion, and even pride. The reason Lennart's, opening conversations are so good and is similar to the answer to Andre's question. I am, with my colleagues, trying to get all the sort of lectures recorded and online. And the first, online 5 minutes during class will be a quiz over that lecture material, right? Got that out of the way, downloaded the sort of critical information, kind of in the front loading of the class, Medium article we saw before. Then I'm gonna shatter all of the students into teams and have really 20 to 30 minute conversations with each team member. Only require students to see 2 or 3 of those conversations before they have their own, and then they can stick around and keep asking questions. They can depart. They've got to look me in the eye for 20 minutes. They've got to sort of see the sort of like, oh, what is this thing going on here? And engage at that sort of micro level where the interests and the giggles and the laughter and the sort of all of that can create a pavement of experience that give people permission to, oh, well, the professor really did notice this thing. I think I'll amplify it next week. And I'll also see if I can apply it here and here. Online doesn't work unless it's shattered like that. It's granular and people feel like they still get personal contact in that way, in that kind of like, oh, people are leaning in kind of way. Sorry to play the camera as much.
I think it works.
I've been lucky enough to see a lot of my students more likely to share their work in class because we have the tool. I could just flip it over, show my screen, they get excited, they show you what they did or a problem that they resolved. I'm like, wow, great. Maybe they would have been quiet over in the back of the classroom back there in that seat, you know? And I'm seeing more and more involvement, you know, when somebody has a question and they want to show the problem that they're having. More and more people are like, oh, well, I could show my screen and I could show my screen. Maybe again, I just got lucky. I got the right kind of students. But man, you're right. Once you see the spark, there's no stopping it. And in a class where there's no involvement, there's absolutely no spark. And the dynamic Rogers show that I put on doesn't help.
All right. We have one question from the audience here around Jason's initial remarks. The topic of IPD for architecture learning was very interesting from Jason. How do you see the construction side of academic learning for programs like Stanford, CIFE fitting in?
Okay. Great question, a very pregnant question, especially in these times. I would offer two scaffolds to sort of explore the answer to that question. The first is categorical. From what I understand of the Stanford CIFE, the Center for Integrated Facilities Education or similar, is that it's either graduate or postgraduate online learning. And from Rogers, analysis, these are focused, technically competent, driven folks that you're getting into a room and ultimately just getting to collaborate on how to get around problems on their current projects and how to structure projects in the future. So I feel a kinship in my consulting, because especially my VDC consulting is folks that are like, I got this goddamn model. Why does the general contractor use it? Like, how do we start engendering conversations in 3, 4, 5, and 6D? And then also we have at New York Tech, we have an undergraduate construction management sequence. That's where the real estate finance class is that I mentioned before. And these are folks, traditionally they're, first, second generation college learners. But, I'd say 50% of my students are sons of plumbers, electricians, and other tradesmen. And they knew they had to go to college, but, the language they grew up in is construction. At those levels, everyone recognizes construction is inefficient. I mean, we've been publishing articles about this for 15, 20, 30, 50 years, right? Everyone's seen that goddamn graph where everybody else is productive. Why aren't we?
Yeah.
And so there's this, unfortunately, at the academic level, there's this sort of unproductive detachment, this judgment that tends to happen at the podium, the academic podium, where it's like, this is so messed up. And that's how most conversations start. They're not opportunity-based conversations. A lot of times you'll see folks like, well, who cares? But you'll see conversations that start when they want to sell you something about, here are the opportunities we're missing. Here are the tools we didn't have before. Here's how the tools can help us with those opportunities. So I think like at the CIF at Stanford and in construction management classes, the ground is already pregnant with this kind of dissatisfaction where designers can find a foothold and start making a difference. Mm-hmm. The problem I'm observing, I wouldn't say we, but I'm observing, is codifying that dissatisfaction into an undergraduate curriculum. So folks who are first time in the ACE industry and don't understand, what's efficient, what's not inefficient, don't come with the kind of biases where that kind of opinions from the professor are pregnant. In other words, hey, this is how it's done. When you take BC1 and BC2, you learn how building systems work. And you're introduced to systemic thinking without any computational background. And the problem isn't there and it's not important yet. So I feel like the person who answered that question may have already anticipated that this is an industry problem and a high level academic problem, and it may not find the purchase yet at the sort of undergraduate level. I only sort of see thesis students at New York Tech, 5th year design students at the undergraduate level, really begin to grapple the kind of opportunities that those kind of discussions have. I hope that starts the questioner's vocabulary to continue this conversation.
Okay, Leonard, IPD,
Yep.
architecture, learning, construction, that is like breaking down silos.
Yeah.
That's your thing, man. Talk.
Yeah, I mean,
Talk about breaking down silos.
we do talk about IPD, which I think is a great thing. One of the things, but especially a lot of CM students, they are sort of often their family come from a construction background, and they're like, well, they're told that doesn't work in reality, blah blah blah, by their parents. You know, because I think New York is tremendously behind in this area, and so I'm not labeling up IPD, but we are running IPD. You know, we don't look at the contracts so much. We do look at some IPD contracts, but it really focusing on, even without IPD, it's about collaboration and at least pretend you're on the same team to get the project done and so forth. And it's interesting to see the psychology change when you actually team people up, an architect with a CM person up, and they start working on a project together. It changes the whole thing. So I think IPD is what we should all be doing because the end result is so much better, especially for the owner. If the owner is sort of the third leg in that, it's a collaboration between the designer, contractor, and owners, because the goal is to build something for the owner, and they should be part of this as well. And I do feel, you know, there's of course examples in the past, sort of Empire State Building, where they didn't use technology on BIM, but it was kind of IPD the way it was built. But with BIM, it is really opens up the whole possibility for IPD. And that's why we use now the spring Revisto, where everybody logged in and had dialogues about design decision, constructability, and then operations. So everybody was chiming in. It's a really interesting conversation coming from that. So we're kind of running our classes as sort of experiments of, you know, the profession and how do people you know, collaborate and how can we guide them. So less on the sort of contract IPD language, but more of how can we work together, you know. So
All right, anything else? Onur? Well, that was construction. You're out of that, right?
I've been out of it.
Okay, I'm not going to poke you on this one. That's all right. That's all right.
It's funny. We used to do these things in a very unorganized way, pre-BIM, I would say. But anyway, I'll just leave it there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Roger, you have something to.
Well, when we talk about BIM, I mean, I'm all over it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, try that without, okay, try your answer. Here's a challenge. Try to answer that question without mentioning an Autodesk product. Sorry, couldn't help it.
Amazon products?
Autodesk.
Collaborative workspaces?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no getting around it that you know that BIM is a tool that's going to help in these times and help in these type of projects. So I mean, how can I answer that question without talking about the tools that I work with every day or tools that I love? But you know, I was going to come in and chime in and say how these tools can be misused, right? So I don't think I have to talk about it without mentioning a particular tool. Can I show a particular tool? All right, I'm going to show a tool. I don't know what tool this is, but, you know, hey, do we have to use, you know, generative design to lay out desks in a location to maximize the you know, ability to look out the window? I mean, can I do that without it? Right? So, you know, great. We use the tool and we got all of these different iterations, but I guess it's still possible that, you know, you're using the tool to generate options. Maybe there was one or two that I didn't think of, right? But are we using the tool just for the sake of using the tool, or are we using the tool because I have to use the tool because we're, you know, we're remote or we need this type of collaboration? I mean, I saw somebody do this exercise where they like, oh, well, great. Now that I got the desks there, and wait, there's something wrong with that family. Maybe we could go into Dynamo and fix it. But do we need to? I mean, I saw an exercise where they were like, okay, well, we generated all these designs. We ended up picking one of them because they, you know, maximized the number of desks and shortest distance to the exit. But, you know, because the desk wasn't, because the desk was a nested component of a you know, a glass partition screen and a standing desk, and it didn't work out. It threw it on the wrong level, or, you know, the spacing was incorrect, or they overlapped. You know, are we using it just for the sake of using it? Then they went into Dynamo and they said, oh, well, let's use Dynamo to orient and reorient and adjust. They spent 20 minutes on an exercise in Dynamo to fix a desk. Well, if you know how to use the tool properly, you wouldn't have to go through those exercises. You come in, you fix the desk, you orient, you know, you have the proper work planes, and it resolved the problem in 15 seconds. But I watched the whole video on how Dynamo could have been used to resolve a problem with the desk. So, yeah, no, you're right. I can't talk about BIM without talking about the products that I teach. So you kind of set me up to fail there.
Yeah, couldn't help it. No, but that's okay. Angela just came in with the question. She's got the feeling that, you know, the path and the collaboration was, you know, lacking in education 10 years ago, and that now it's much more about the process and the collaborative nature and the how. So her question is, how do you impress upon students that the how matters, how they work, how the importance of it? How do you impress that? And does that extend into other types of software, which is a whole different can of worms? So let's focus on one.
Well, I have an answer. I'm not sure it ports with everyone else's. I would say 4 times a semester in every class, I bring up the difference and the distinction and the dichotomy between working hard and working smart. And I think Roger was trying to sort of orbit that same conversation just in his last comments. So I only mean to amplify them. But at the risk of opening up a whole nother can of worms, studio culture in academia is toxic, and it sets up students to work 60, 65, 70, 80 hours a week once they graduate. It makes that feel normal. And it does so by sort of kind of, I think, preying on their ego and saying, you can do better, work harder, and whatever. And by the time I get to them in the second half of their undergraduate career, you know, they're used to pulling all-nighters quite frequently. And, you know, I really stop in my studios and in my seminars, my technical seminars, and try and take the glory out of that and say that if you're sitting next to someone who's working in studio till 4 in the morning, usually, you know, 4 days a week, there's something broken here. And what's broken is trying to figure out what the answer is you're trying to solve every night, and then finding the quickest way to that answer so you can learn from it and move on. I think that studio culture has infected, you know, architecture education and architectural culture for 30, 40, 50 years, and we're dealing with a lot of issues economically because we find ourselves underpaid and we find ourselves undervalued. But to directly answer that question, which is sort of like, you know, how do you impress on the way that you work matters. You lay bare, I think, the sort of embarrassment you feel when it takes a long time to come up with what you do or do not feel like is a good solution. And instead, I think time and time again, every other week, I'm trying to kind of glorify who came up with the smartest answer to this and how little time did you spend on this. I don't mean to turn education into an optimization problem. That's not what I'm trying to advocate for here. But instead, to value students' free time as much as you value their hard work is something we're not very good at as educators. We haven't hit that sort of, even in my own faculty, we haven't hit that sort of sweet spot yet. And to directly answer the question, you know, I problematize working late nights. I problematize working hard. Students will come to me and say, Professor, I've been working on this for 6 hours and I can't find the answer. And I just stop right there. Like, you're probably using hyperbole and you know, kind of over dramatic description of what you've been doing, because you've probably been on like YouTube also that whole time. But this is not the way that professionals talk to each other. And I think creating that kind of cultural evaluation will help students find balance, especially as they move into the workforce.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in? If not, I'd say we're all got our dinner earned. I've got one last thing I want to share with the group. Oh, sorry. First, I need to share my screen, don't I? So there's this a million. Seriously, other than, am I the only one who's getting confused between different types of platforms? It's like I forget which, like Ring Central, Zoom,
Luckily,
Teams, Skype.
yeah.
Everybody got their stupid buttons in a different place. It's all the same functionality, but everybody hides their buttons in a different corner.
Sometimes it's the actual same platform. Ring Central and Zoom is the same thing.
Actually, yeah, those two are identical. So I think we've just had a really great panel. Next time in 2 weeks, Angela, with the last question there, is coming up with the company showcase, ENIAC's ecosystem. And I guess her question was slightly loaded because I know that she's trying to find a path to have ENIAC staff buy into that ecosystem and recognize how much it matters how they work. In September, we're currently curating a panel of another BIM in academia thing. The year in preview, we're going to gather a couple of professors, a couple of teachers who will present what they are planning on teaching over the course of the year and what they're trying to accomplish. So it'll probably largely be graduate and postgraduate work. And then we will bookend that in hopefully June after with a student showcase where the students are going to showcase their actual work and what they have accomplished. And whoever remembers what the teachers had announced in September can go and start judging the teachers. I think that it's a beautiful thing, and we'll keep that after the year of this academic focus for the year 2020. We will keep that September, June preview review going for as a framework for our group here. I think it's a very promising, interesting thing to keep academia interesting and to keep that link alive. In October, we will collaborate with Thornton Tomasetti again. Same thing we've done, well, similar to what we've done last time. Their tech symposium is still being organized, so the tech symposium will happen. And we will have a night of collaboration with them. We're still trying to figure out how exactly make the symposium happen in this online world. Stay posted. We'll keep everybody in the loop. In October, I hope to have the practice discussion following this discussion. After the BIM tools for the future of teaching, a BIM tools for the future of the practice. I don't know if some of you may have read a couple of articles out there. In the Times, Liz Diller had an article with a couple of thoughts that I personally actually disagree with. Phil Bernstein and Mario, I keep forgetting his last name, they're currently having a series in the Architects newspaper going back and forth on a weekly basis. That sounds kind of interesting. And then later in November, a couple of vendor showcases, Clarity as a vendor showcase, as a software package, what they can do. And we're hopefully gonna compare rendering engines, live, real-time versus traditional rendering. And if all goes well, by then, Pierce just had Pierce's wife just gave birth a couple of weeks ago, and hopefully by December he will be back up and running and able to give us a little bit of a downstream BIM collaboration on brick hybrid projects, which is something he's done on the CM side a lot. So that is that coming up over the next 6 months. As usual, if you have any questions, let us know. If you have any topics that you would like to see and present out there, let us know. You know, I can be sitting here in front of that screen or at a bar with friends anytime. We're putting this up for our audience. We're putting this up for the membership. So we need this to be relevant to you. Give us your feedback, please. If you have something you want to contribute, let us know. We have a pretty solid backlog for the next couple of months, which is something that makes me happy. It hasn't always been like that. But we will, you know, we still have spring semester to curate, so let us know what's going on out there. Bunch of more comments coming in from extra modeling, okay. Bradley from the West Coast, for example, yes, that's the big advantage of being online right now. We can, you know, cross the coast a little bit easier, and the ones that you see on screen right now, those are old ideas from pre-pandemic times. We're currently reaching out and trying to get a little bit more varied impact and input from other areas. Hopefully Populous out of London will do the Clarity thing. We'll see about that. Ian is hopefully going to do that, or one of his colleagues. So that was the last bit of our housekeeping. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, our panelists. Thank you, everybody who attended. We have had a great retention rate here. So I'm really happy about that. You guys must have been really fascinating and interesting. Other than that, I hope to see everybody again on August 19th. Thank you, everybody, for the insights, for committing your time, for being here. This was exactly the type of discussion I had hoped for. I'll definitely be in touch with all of you for some reason, one way or the other, that's for damn sure. Other than that, thank you. Have a good night. Enjoy your dinner and hopefully a drink, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Nice to meet you all. See you next time.
A pleasure.
One thing
See you
we
soon.
missed. Andrew normally takes us out to a bar after the Revit user group meeting.
Oh, man.
We'll get there. We'll get back there.
See you guys.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.